Today I am sharing my version of a classic Penn Dutch recipe. Today we are making Shoofly pie. If you've never heard of this, it is a molasses-based pie. So if you don't like gingerbread or molasses, you probably will want to skip this one. And it has a very, very sweet flavor, very interesting crumb. This is what we call a wet bottom Shoofly pie as opposed to a dry bottom. They both exist, but this is my preference. Get your oven preheating to 425 degrees Fahrenheit. We need it nice and hot, at least for part of the baking time. And as it's a pie, you're going to need a pie crust. This is my favorite, absolute favorite sour cream pie crust. Oh, man, I get to find pie crust that is as easy and as delicious as this one. We're going to go ahead, quickly roll it out into like a 12-inch circle, 12-inch circle, and arrange it in a 9-inch pie plate. I have been working on an all butter pie crust, but let me tell you, my sour cream and my sourdough pie crusts, I'm yet to find anything better than those. Always keep your pie crust moving as you're rolling it out, that way it doesn't stick. Like, roll it out to a nice circle, but my circles are never nice. Quick check, that should fit. Roll her up. All right, go ahead and just press that neatly into your pie plate, and we'll flute the edges. Try to make it nice and pretty. Fold under any excess crust. You don't want to cut it off and discard it because this pie crust is delicious. So you want as much of it with that pie as possible. And I do like to just poke the bottom all over with a fork. We're not par baking it or pre-baking it though. Once you've prepped it, we're just gonna pop it in the fridge and let it sit there while we make our filling, which comes together pretty easily. All right, for the next part, I like to use a food processor because it makes the job quick and easy, but I will put notes in the instructions if you just don't have a food processor. I'm sure the Amish are probably not using one of these. It is doable without one, it just makes it a lot easier. So in your food processor, you're going to combine 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour, knock it off the top there, with 2/3 cup of firmly packed dark brown sugar. Again, very strong molasses flavor in this pie, and dark brown sugar has more molasses in it, so it just adds into that flavor. We'll also be using a teaspoon of ground cinnamon, 1/4 teaspoon of ground nutmeg, and 1/4 teaspoon of table salt. We're just going to quickly pulse together our ingredients, just like 7 to 10 1-second pulses should do the trick. And then we're going to add our butter. So this is 6 tablespoons of cold unsalted butter, and I'm going to cut it into a couple pieces. Now, if I were doing this by hand, I would either use a pastry cutter to cut this into the other ingredients, or I would use a grater and grate the butter and then mix it in, and then just probably use a pastry cutter or a fork to work it together a little bit more. I'll show you the final consistency, of course. So we're going to just scatter our butter over top, the other ingredients. Let's put our lid back on, and we are going to pulse this again until we have a mixture that looks like coarse crumbs. Let's take a look. So that was like 10, 11 1-second pulses. I want to make sure everything's nicely combined, and I want to make sure the butter is completely cut into the mixture. I don't need it clinging to itself or anything like we'll do with like a streusel. I just want that butter nicely distributed. So hopefully you can see how this looks. You've got really teeny tiny pieces of butter, but nothing significant. It's going to be really dry mixture. So this is good. Just going to set it aside. All right, you are going to need 3/4 cup of a very hot, like steaming hot or boiling hot water. We're going to dissolve some baking soda in this. This is a 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, and we're just going to whisk this until that baking soda is completely dissolved. Water needs to be nice and hot. Okay, and once that's dissolved, let's take a look. No baking soda floating around in there. We're going to add our molasses. You need 3/4 cup of molasses for this recipe. Super important note, choose an unsulphured molasses. Do not use blackstrap molasses. And unfortunately, last year I had a problem with a lot of people using organic molasses. It didn't say on the front that it was blackstrap. It just looked like regular molasses, but on the back, if you looked at the ingredients, you found out it was blackstrap molasses. They didn't find out until after they made their cookies, and they tasted horrible. So just pay attention to the ingredients. I usually use Grandma's brand or Brer Rabbit. They both work nicely just as long as it's an unsulphured molasses, because molasses is already super strong, and if you use like a blackstrap, it's going to be really terrible. I like to get this molasses incorporated. Hot water helps make that a little bit easier. Usually feel it like settled on the bottom, so I just whisk until you can't feel that anymore. Last ingredient we're going to be adding is 1 large egg yolk. This should really be room temperature. So we don't need the egg white, that would mess with our texture. Just want the yolk. I Just always pass that egg yolk back and forth. Now this recipe is new to my website, but it's not new to me. I actually developed it quite a few years ago for my friend Holly's website over at Spend with Pennies. Let me break that up a little bit before I add it. So it's been around for a couple years now, but I just never shared it before. Not here anyway. So that egg yolk, you want to get that nicely combined. Your molasses should have cooled down your water, so you're not dealing with like a boiling hot water mixture anymore. So you're safe to add the egg without worrying about it curdling. Now at this point, I also like to add just a teaspoon of vanilla extract. I feel like it helps add some depth and kind of cuts some of the molasses strength a bit. All right, so get that nicely incorporated, and it should look a little foamy on top at this point. So now we're ready to assemble our pie. All right, I grabbed my pie crust out of the fridge, and we're going to bake this pie on a parchment-lined baking sheet because just in case it spills any, you want to catch that. You don't want your oven to catch it, or you'll have a big mess on your hands. All right, we're going to add about half of this molasses mixture into the crust. It's about 3/4 cup we're adding here now, but it doesn't have to be exact. You know, things get a little weird with this pie. It's very different from a lot of the pies we normally make. All right, then we're going to take our crumb mixture and add about half. Again, you don't have to measure it. Sprinkle that over all that molasses liquid. I'm not personally a big molasses person myself. It's not my favorite pie, but I do think it really is a good example and a very tasty version of Shoofly pie, which is evidently named after a brand of molasses that was named after a mule. Fun fact for the day. Let's add the rest of our molasses mixture. It's a quick pie. And you're not going to get even layers here. This layered method of distribution helps the pie like bake evenly and helps get everything where you want it, but it's gonna look a little wonky while you're doing it, and that's fine. All right, let's top everything with the rest of our crumb mixture. And I do try to make sure this is nice and even for the topping, and I'll try to cover all of the molasses that's showing, but that's not really a big deal. When it comes out of the oven, it can look a little bit, you know, wonky, and I think I've said that twice for this pie now, and that's okay. It's expected. We're going to take this pie over to the center rack of our 425-degree Fahrenheit oven. We're going to bake it for 15 minutes. Careful, it's jiggly. So we're starting at this higher temperature because we want to start the pie cooking and get it to set, but we don't want to overcook it or it'll be like cakey inside. So after that initial 15 minutes, we drop the temperature down to 350 degrees. We're going to continue to bake it for another 22 to 28 minutes. I know that's a range, but you're just going to check on it. You'll know it's done if you jostle a little bit. The center should be slightly jiggly, but the pie should be mostly set. All right, now this pie is going to need to cool before you cut into it. I recommend cooling it until it's no longer warm to the touch because that's going to give you the best slices. Personally, do I like it warm? Yeah, it's just a little bit messy. Okay, so once our pie is no longer warm to the touch, let's go ahead and cut a slice. I always get nervous cutting in front of you guys. Should really probably cut a smaller slice because this is a very rich pie. If I don't break my crust, first slice is the trickiest. All right, that is how you make Shoofly pie. Again, very strong molasses flavor, classic Penn Dutch recipe. I would love to know what you think about this one. It's very unique, that's for sure. Take a nice little bite. Super rich pie. This would be something different to serve on Thanksgiving. It's good. Makes me feel like a fraud. My hair's in my mouth. Almost as terrible as this mess I just made. The dogs. First slice is the trickiest. I talk too much.